Hi, everyone. Going to be doing our sermon a little differently this morning. Uh, Let me start off by saying that our mission as a church still remains the same: to connect people with Jesus and with one another. We're just going to have to do that a little different way for a couple of weeks. Uh, I'm speaking to you from a very different location this morning. I'm sitting in the empty uh, park and ride lot away from any people, just to be safe that way. Um, and it's interesting. For a couple of weeks, we've been talking about creating sacred spaces, like personal prayer altars or prayer closets, in order to get away from worldly distractions. And just like Jesus had to get away from the crowds sometimes in order to have some essential time to pray and to worship. This week we're distancing ourselves from crowds for a whole different reason. Um, we made the very difficult and frankly very distasteful decision to not hold public services this Sunday, possibly for a few more Sundays, as part of our nation's efforts to hopefully slow down the spread of COVID-19, also known as the coronavirus, terms we're all kind of sick of hearing by now. Um, I don't think Emmanuel has ever had to close their doors, maybe more than once or twice, and that was due to some severe winter weather emergencies. So the deacons, or the decision rather, to do this was not made lightly. Uh, on the one hand, the elders and I do not want to do anything that's going to create more fear, more panic. Uh, as our friend Jerry said last week during Tim's comments, that's the job of the news media. He got the biggest laugh of the day, better than any of my jokes did. Anyway, we also knew, though, that there was a very real possibility that schools and libraries and other places where a lot of people congregate were going to have to close their doors by the end of the week. And especially after the president declared a national emergency, that's exactly what's happening. Even the casino is closed down for a few weeks. That tells you something. So we really wrestled with this decision, and we came to the conclusion that we would follow the plans, example of the Pittsburgh Public Schools. If they closed, we would not hold services at the church. And so now, because they did, we're kind of scrambling to find new ways to worship together and to stay connected as a church family. I have to admit, I am not thrilled with the idea of videotaping myself. I've always said that I have a face for radio and a voice for silent movies, but here we are. And I'm not going to try to post the sermon that I originally had planned for this week until we figure out some technical stuff, like how to show my PowerPoint slides and all that stuff that I do. So for right now, this is how I'm doing my visuals. Let me bring it up there and I'll show you. That's taking a minute, but hopefully you see that. Am I showing? Oh, here's how I could do it. This is better because I don't know if I can switch it. Anyway, we'll figure this all out. Let me get back to my notes. All right. What I want to talk to you about for a few minutes this morning is how we're going to deal with this situation. Let me start off by reminding you what Jesus said about worry. You can find that in Matthew chapter 6, starting with verse 25. It goes like this. Jesus said, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? And here's the key. He said, can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? So why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They don't labor or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today, tomorrow thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, well, what shall I eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But, and this is one of my life verses, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. And then notice that he ends the passage by saying, therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And notice there that Jesus didn't say, hey, I have a nice suggestion for you. He makes it a command. He says, do not worry. And he starts off there in verse 25 by saying, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life. The Greek tense there is properly translated, stop worrying. And then he kind of bookends it all. He ends this passage by saying, therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. The tense in the original Greek there, it's a little different there. It means don't start worrying. So in essence, what Jesus is saying is, if you are worrying, quit. And if you haven't started, don't. I love also what Peter says in his first epistle. This is 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. He says, cast all your fears, all your anxieties, all your worries, all your concerns once and for all on him. For he cares about you with deepest affection and watches over you very carefully. So, if we're calling off our public services, the ones we'd hold inside the church building, does that mean we're not trusting God enough? Well, first of all, let's remind ourselves of something I think we already all know. The church is not that pretty yellow brick building that sits in the middle of Davis Avenue. We are the church. You, can I get my hand in there? You are the church. And this momentary crisis, it gives us an unprecedented opportunity to be the church. And I really feel that starts by setting an example for our neighbors in the Brighton Heights community. I saw this story that I think illustrates what I mean. Let me read it. A young mother was trying to explain the coronavirus thing to her 9-year-old, and she wrote this. She said, my daughter was bummed that a spring break mini vacation we had planned was canceled, and I could tell she was also worried that she would get sick or even worse, that she'd have to be treated for sickness. That's what really bothered her. The idea of a throat swab was absolutely abhorrent to her. And tried explaining to her we were in all likelihood going to be fine, but no matter how I put it to her, her concerns did not go away until I told her this. Imagine that the whole world was suddenly dumped into a swimming pool. But there are some people, let me back up. Lots of us can swim. And some of us even have floaties on our arms. And, one of the good piece of news in this, that evidently children are more resilient than most to this virus. But anyway, lots of us can swim. Some of us have floaties on our arms. But there are some people who can't swim well, and they need to be saved. The big challenge is that there aren't enough lifeguards to save everyone, and there are too many people in the pool, so it's hard to see who needs help. I told her that the best thing we can do is to get out of the pool. Just go over to where our towels are, sit down, have a popsicle, reapply the sunscreen, relax. She looked at me strangely and said, that makes more sense than anything else you've said tonight. What I didn't tell her is that there are an awful lot of folks who are hoarding life preservers, or loudly trying to teach people who can't swim how to swim, or proclaiming that there's no pool or just splashing around and not listening to the lifeguard whistles. Well, we are trying our best to listen to the lifeguards. I attended a meeting, the Brighton Heights Citizens Federation general meeting last Thursday, and at least half of the time was taken up with questions and concerns about the coronavirus. And there has been a lot of misinformation floating around out there, kind of like a virus. But here are the basics. Here are the basics. Death rates for people infected by COVID-19 are still being figured out, but the range of estimates runs about 0.4%. And that's in areas with strong quarantines, like we've got going on now here, advanced warning, good medical care, and healthier populations. It's between 0.4% and 15%. And that's among people who've been exposed to many severe cases, or who without good medical care, or have other severe pre-existing conditions. They say the scholarly consensus is about 1 to 2%, which would be like 1 in 50 to 1 in 100. 1 to 2% of people diagnosed with COVID will probably die of it. And that's why our top health experts have determined that our best strategy at this point is to practice, it's a very depressing term, but to practice social distancing. Fortunately, this is one time that maybe social media can be a help to us. We can at least connect that way. Because in addition to posting sermons online, we're working to add worship music from our awesome praise team. Going to post that. We've asked him to put up some communion meditations because we want to encourage you to observe communion, around your kitchen table. It's really kind of cool to know that the Lord is going to be sitting there at your table while you do that. It becomes the Lord's table. We're also even creating some online lessons for our kiddos. We certainly want to keep them in mind during this time. We're probably going to have to figure out some way to collect offerings online, maybe, because we got to remember our monthly expenses still keep going on. In fact, they might even need to increase if we find that we need to provide some additional aid to families in need. By the way, this is totally off the subject, but it's been on my mind since that meeting, the Brighton Heights Citizens Federation meeting. One of the things they talked about was there have been a lot of problems when the kids are going home from school. There have been fights, things like that. And so they're instituting a project called Safe Passages, and they're asking people along the way to help, encourage the kids to get home in a good manner. And, I'm thinking, we've done these wonderful pop-up things, the cookies and we've got the bunny booth coming up and that kind of thing. Man, I would love for us to commit to taking one day a week for the rest of the school year, just to stand out there, maybe pass out cookies, maybe pass out popsicles, whatever, and just encourage the kids. Hey, did you have a good day? Keep it up, that kind of thing. So keep that in the back of your mind. That's something I really want to do. All right, we still have a lot to figure out. We do on how to get through all this. But I know this. Emmanuel Christian Church is going to continue to be a light in the darkness and do what we can to help everybody get through this. Maybe we're going to have to pass out rolls of toilet paper or bottles of hand sanitizer. I don't know. It's interesting. Someone's noted that in every crisis, the church has an opportunity to witness. When plagues spread through the Roman Empire in the early centuries of Christianity, it was the church that led the way in caring for the sick and marginalized. And when epidemics spread across 16th century Europe, it was Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer. He spoke on what it looked like for Christians to act wisely in caring for one another and working alongside government authorities. The Christian response to plagues begins with some of Jesus' most famous teachings: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and love your neighbor as yourself. So let's remember to wash our hands. And I think this is going to show up backwards, but I like the saying: wash your hands, and then wash some feet.